All right, let's get started. Uh, let's see. Maybe we can start with Anant today and go down. So the prompt is: are there any big gaps in the coverage of the topic in this overall issue? And then comments on the article you picked and general reactions. So Anant.
Thank you. Uh, yeah, so first I sort of I skimmed through all the articles when I first ran into them. Um so I thought I think something Jenna shared in the channel before, which is the the titles of the article and the sort of the different aspects of planning seemed exciting, and that seemed like okay, this seemed like a really good sort of list of documents to rely on for planning. But so I sort of read through each of those articles with that mindset. I felt a lot of the articles really lacked in detail, especially in it seemed like the articles seem to be like how to find, how to make, or how to do planning type titles, and when you read into it, it lacked sort of some uh, sort of essential how-tos are like the details of how the steps that's involved in that particular process that they're dealing with. So I felt like one example, like for example, that I took note of was uh, reframing tech debt, right? So tech debt is often a problem in a developing product, but somehow I feel if for a technical article, for a technical document, uh, it needs to go into more details than just saying like tech debt or technical shortcuts. That seems like what an article or magazine that intended for non-engineers would say. For engineers that expected more details as to what specifically constitutes a tech debt and what are the typical mechanisms that one, like what are the typical libraries or software. Like I was looking for some technical details of it, which was not available. It felt like another sort of philosophical piece on tech debt and how we should move on from tech debt to tech wealth. Like it's obvious, but it's the how that was interesting to me, and I felt like that was lacking, and which is why I chose the sort of the article that I chose from the issue that I thought was maybe interesting the most to me was the request for comments, the RFC, which I felt was a lot of the like new protocol development happens via forums, and just reading through them and being an observer on a number of them, I felt I'm interested to hear more about what our others think about this. But the request for comments was an interesting, again, an article, but again, it's in the details. It was like it was almost like an afterthought in that process. The writer mentions on like dealing, like asking the comments from the customer success or business development or even customers. Primarily the request for comments was with how to make technical like architectural decisions between engineers rather than just like at the product level. So again, it was not quite it wasn't complete, and it had the like a very exciting title, but in the details was lacking. But I felt it gave me some context as to okay, how do other traditional organizations think about these processes, and compare and contrast that with what's happening in some of the latest protocol development. The one thing that came to my mind was the lot of A16Z vote on wormhole security recently. I mean, not recently, I think some time ago, 6, 7, 8 months ago, and it sort of put in front some of the sort of problems in the request for comments process. Like if there is an important stakeholder that doesn't participate early in the sort of temperature check process, but later on at the actual vote counting process they get involved, and how to handle that and so on and so forth. It seems more the problems or the process is more complicated now than what this article was articulating. It's like a more conventional product, but it is still useful. So anyway, I'll stop there. I will pass it on to Anuraj.
Uh, yeah, so I didn't go into the details of any of the article. I just skimmed through everything, and at least this issue was a little underwhelming. I was expecting more of actual use cases, what has been done at Stripe or something like that. But this seemed like, some advice. Okay, we should do that. We should feel happy. We should something like that. So yeah, it was a little underwhelming. But yeah, as Anand, I also was the RFC one was also interesting for me, and it seems like documentation does really help, and it seems like the Amazon process, right? A longer version of the Amazon process for their like meetings. So you write something down, and then like it improves maybe the communication. But I think like there are limitations to that too, because I think like a lot of software engineers I think don't actually think in the language, and like I have met many really great programmers. Like if you ask them to explain something, they wouldn't be able to explain it. Like they would like mumble something here and there, maybe some random sentences. But like actually, if you look at the code, and like it would be actually like the top class code any engineer like would write. That also brings me to the other article like I found interesting was the just hire great people. So like I thought about this quite a lot. Like I've been on both sides of the hiring process, and then I was discussing this with one of my friends at the German space agency. Then how does the hiring go on there? And then I asked him like how do they figure out if the other engineer, like the interviewee, is a great engineer or not, or if the person would be able to write a great software. And he just gave a crisp, a small answer like you never know. That was his answer. Like so basically, like yeah, that was something interesting for me. Like yeah, so those were the two articles that I found interesting, and with that, I'll pass on to Grigory.
Can I pass it on to Steven because I just joined and trying to put my thoughts together.
So yeah, I mean, I kind of felt the same as the other guys, everyone else about the whole issue. I mean, it really depends on who they're writing for, and I feel like it's really hard to pick out what's missing or judge it without really knowing who is it for. Because for me, I just felt like it was like lacking a lot of details, and it didn't feel like I was going anywhere. I personally wouldn't really read these types of things, but yeah, I mean, out of the articles that I read, I read the RFC one and also the other the Wicked Problem one. I mean, I I just felt like it was just missing a lot of details. I mean, even the RFC one, I just thought it was just. I mean, I guess it was just okay. It was just kind of telling a story of how to start using RFCs in a software company. But like, I mean, I've already had experience with RFC type process at a company, and I mean, what we did as our group did was just copy what the Kubernetes team did with RFCs and just copied their template, and we just used it. And then I just wish like it went into like more like trade-offs on what sections to have or what questions to have for it, so that the RFC fits the problem more or something like that. That's what I feel about RFCs from personal experience, but yeah, I didn't really go into that. I kind of went into a story of how to do the process. So yeah, I'm not sure who they're writing for exactly. So I just feel like if I judge them without knowing that, then it's really hard, or it's really unfair in a sense. But yeah, I guess I'll pass to Venkat.
Yeah, I think I had the same reaction, and I actually went looked at the editorial, and it claims the magazine is for the developer community, but at least this issue clearly was written, I think, more with like managers and non-technical executives in mind, because even people who don't know a whole lot about the software world would find some of this pretty shallow. So my suspicion is this issue, both because it focuses on a broad but shallow topic, which is planning, which kind of is where managers try to make an impact, plus being the last issue of the magazine. At this point, it got canceled. And I heard from the grapevine that, yeah, it was canceled. It's not that they deliberately planned it for a 19-issue run and then stopped it with a very planned way. ironic. It was canceled because I guess it wasn't doing what they were hoping. Um, and I think the other issues, based on just looking at the topic titles, some of them are going to be more detailed and technical. So we'll see how sampling other issues goes. But yeah, this issue is kind of interesting. I have the full paper collection since I bought it for researching magazines, and I was trying to read it cover to cover, the way we used to read magazines back in the day, in the 80s, and it felt, I don't know, like going to a historical fair or something, like a very surreal experience. But it was also interesting because reading content like this in a serialized way as opposed to random access way, it gives you a sense of what they're trying to do in terms of, like, build up a comprehensive picture of a topic in somewhat of like a thought through reasonable way. So that was kind of interesting, and I think I ended up with the idea that this is a good set of questions and a terrible set of answers, but the good questions form like a decent map of the topic and what's missing, and how do you deal with what's missing. So to answer my own prompt, the one big gap I saw was, from my experience of actually being part of planning processes, it's much more right-brained than this. This feels like a lot of like left-brained spreadsheet, roadmap, program management, dashboard, that whole category of approaches. And that's kind of important, but it's only half the story. And in my opinion, it's the less important half of the story. And if you let this side of the thinking dominate the planning process, you will end up with like a I don't know, slideware bureaucracy that becomes slowly overwhelming, and then all the technical people start to resent all the managers, and eventually it becomes like a government agency and collapses under its own weight. Whereas if you focus on the right brain side, which is, what's the story developing here? What's the story of our project? What are the sort of highs and lows? What are the big adventures and crisis moments? What are the dragons that were slayed? That's, I think, the right brain focus. And if you kind of like, with a very light touch, somehow stay oriented there and make that the substance of how you do planning, and let everything else be extremely light touch and even like, non-codified, things go much better. At least that was my strategy back when I was a project and product manager. My strategy was basically, I'm the chief storyteller of the project, and for the 10, 12 people on my team, yes, we're going to discuss technical topics and product decisions, but sprint to sprint, my goal is going to be, what's the story? Can I keep telling the story? And that seemed to work pretty well. And I didn't see that addressed anywhere in this whole issue. So that's kind of interesting. But yeah, I did read the RFC's article. I liked the little historical nugget, but otherwise it felt like a big preface that ended up going nowhere. Like I was waiting for the article to actually start, and it never actually got started. Yeah, the rest, I think I like the planning in the dark article where I pulled that one phrase, riskiest assumption test. That's new to me, so that's a concept I think I'll file away. So that's another, I think, value of like looking at a topic comprehensively. Not only do you get a sense of the overall map and the gaps in the map, you pick up little and landmark ideas here and there. So RAT is one such. So an interesting exercise might be, as we read future issues, to try and pick up on like terms that are missing from your vocabulary. Yeah, I think that's it. And looks like Nathan and Jenna are on mute, but let's circle back to Grigory. And yeah, after that, Nathan and Jenna can also chime in if they can speak. So Grigory?
I focused on one article because I didn't have much time. The article is called Planning for Momentum. And I was, as well as everybody here, underwhelmed by this article. And in my view, probably the issue I have with this article written by James Steinier, I don't know who he is probably representative of the issue with the whole magazine. And the problem I see is that he is trying to reimagine planning as a dynamic and generative process. But he never defines what planning is in his view. And probably other authors fall into the same trap. Basically, it's like, it's obvious, it's planning, everybody knows what it is. But no, it is not the case. Just think about what planning is and how would you define it, even when you don't want to reimagine it in any way. And it's kind of hard because the concept of planning is probably overbroad. And different people think different things when they hear the word planning or the term planning. So it is not very well defined concept, and different people see it differently. And in my view, that the main problem of the article planning for momentum, and probably the whole issue. So that's my part.
Jenna or Nathan, if you can and want to speak up, do so. If not, yeah, open for second round.
I'll jump in for a quickie because I think I think we're really on something interesting about this publication. The editors asked lots of good questions, lots of good shaping of what the conversation can be, and then it's hard to have every piece be like super smart and get to the real meat of something. And in my own surfing this morning, I came across a syllabus. I'll drop a link, but it suddenly dawned on me that what our YAC groups could do is study syllabuses. If we go find the right professors, those guys have done a lot of this. It's one way to get at how do you wrap your arms around a topic. And so finding the right dude who's done a course syllabus it just struck me as an interesting option for how we might go at our future groups. Pass back to now Nathan or the group.
I have just a few minutes, so I'll jump in. I mean, I think as far as like critiques, I think everything has been said that I would say. I do think I kind of want to circle back to the RFC piece. I think there was some interesting parallels that I hadn't thought about, but kind of became apparent in the RFC process, and actually how we run things around here. Like the proposal log channel, the discussion threads. It's not as formalized as an RFC process, but it has a lot of the same sorts of goals and aspects to it. The other thing I thought was that it's interesting that, particularly when thinking about it in terms of a GitHub repository of RFCs, and I think Ethereum has something similar, if I recall. I think they have a big repository of EIPs, I think they're called. It's like more structured than the sort of free form wiki that we have on Rome. But it's considerably less structured in conversation than a lot of like corporate intranet sites or sites that sort of purport to be wikis, but are really just kind of groups of very formalized pages. And it strikes me as like, that's an interesting middle ground there about like, how can you have a relatively unstructured conversation about things and about proposals, but still create a set of guidelines that provide a roadmap for somebody who's entering, particularly in a way of like understanding how to stack ideas, which I think is not obvious from Rome. In fact, Rome is kind of anti-stacking, but is a lot more obvious from like an RFC approach. You can kind of start at the end and work your way to one side and work your way to the other there. last comment about storytelling. I think I totally agree with Venkat about storytelling, and I think storytelling is really fundamental. Like even in the sciences, like a good paper is a story. It's a very technical story, but it is a story. Even in math, a journey of how you get there. That's a proof is a story of a type. And I think we tend to neglect that. And so, on the one hand, I think there's a tension. Like I think Anuraj is very right. Is that there are people who are not very good at storytelling, and having a story-centric process really can result in them being and their perspectives being sidelined. But on the flip side, storytelling is so fundamental to what we are. I mean, it's like if I was going to pick a definition of like sentience for like a Star Trek future, I think it wouldn't be intelligence or emotions or anything. It would be the ability to tell stories, and that seems like a very important glue for human groups, and that's not an original observation or anything. So anyway, those are my quick thoughts.
Yeah, there's something there. I think storytelling. Anand posted in the channel that maybe the way to read these sort of left brain treatments of large topics is to actually look for the right brain nuggets. So that might be a meta prompt through all the reading we might do of this magazine. As we read through, like not just what are the important questions and gaps, but also are there nuggets popping out? So not quite sure how to think about that. The next issue we'll read is probably going to be the APIs issue if you want to get a jump ahead. What I was thinking for this track is we'll alternate issues of this magazine with our more regular process of just picking good articles from wherever. So next week we might do the Erlang autobiography that Anuraj found. And then the week after we'll do the APIs issues of this magazine. And I'm thinking we should do at least 4 issues of this magazine to see whether the quality is sort of like variable and other issues are better quality, or whether this is consistently a problem, in which case we should abandon this track. But the topics of the other issues do seem interesting enough that I want to give it good sampling. So 19 issues, 4 issues seems like a good sampling. So API is one I personally am interested in reading. Anybody have picks for the last 2 in our sampling run? There's 19 topics and it's like quite a bit. So I thought it might be a good way to do it. So we don't have to discuss now, but if you have a particular issue you want to pop to the head of the queue, propose that and we'll schedule those first.
I mean, when I was scanning through, I want to think that I want to be more interested in the open source and security issues, but I remember scanning the articles and finding them somewhat underwhelming. So I don't know.
Did anyone go through the architecture issue, software architecture? That seems interesting, at least from the topics.
And I'll put that on the short list. What I might do is, after you guys suggest the issues you want, I might do like a pre-scan and see if it's underwhelming or not. Like if I am underwhelmed, you guys definitely will be. So I'll try to filter out the issues that manage to go a little deeper. So yeah, architecture.
I put the documentation issue on that review because we're often thinking about how to gather project exhausts in a way that's useful.
Yeah.
Maybe that issue had something useful, because coding teams are always thinking about that problem too.
All right, I'll add that to the short list. So we've got architecture and documentation. All right, so any other thoughts? Otherwise we can wrap early. Right. So this is actually kind of like a little bit of an indication of the shallowness of this particular issue, that we're able to do 15-minute scanning and we're done at 8:40. So that's actually a good measure of like how deep reading goes. So fun to keep track of that. All right. So next week will be Erlang founder story, and then the week after that will be the APIs issue. See you guys next week.